In the very beginning, when everything was fresh and new, God made a beautiful garden. It was called the Garden of Eden. This wasn't just any garden. It was the most wonderful place you could ever imagine, filled with everything good and lovely. Tall trees reached up to the bright blue sky, their branches heavy with juicy, colorful fruits. Sparkling rivers giggled as they flowed through the green grass, and flowers of every color bloomed, filling the air with a sweet perfume. It was a perfect home made with all of God's love and care, a place where everything was just right and nothing was ever sad or broken. Into this perfect world, God created the first man. He lovingly scooped up a handful of dust from the ground and breathed his own breath into it. And just like that, the dust became a living person. His name was Adam. God gave Adam a very important job. He was to be the caretaker of the garden, to look after all the amazing plants and animals. God brought all the creatures he had made to Adam, and Adam gave each one its special name. He named the lions, the elephants, the little birds that sang in the trees, and the fish that swam in the shiny rivers. But even with all the animals and the beauty of the garden, God saw that Adam was alone. So God did something truly wonderful. While Adam was sleeping, God took one of his ribs, and from that rib, he made the first woman. Her name was Eve. When Adam woke up and saw her, his heart was filled with joy. She was his perfect friend, someone just like him to share the amazing garden with. Together, they would explore, laugh, and take care of the beautiful world God had made for them. They had everything they could ever need. Adam and Eve lived in the garden with no worries at all. They felt no shame and had no secrets because everything was good and pure. They could walk and talk with God in the cool of the evening, just like you might walk and talk with your best friend. Their hearts were full of happiness and peace. Life was a wonderful adventure every single day, filled with discovery and delight. They were completely safe and perfectly loved in their garden home, living in the warm light of God's presence. It was a life of pure joy, exactly as God had planned it. In the middle of this perfect garden, God had planted two very special trees. One was the tree of life, and the other was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God told Adam and Eve that they could eat from any tree in the entire garden. They could enjoy all the delicious fruits, the sweet berries, and the tasty nuts. The whole garden was theirs to enjoy. But there was just one rule, a single instruction they needed to follow. It was a rule given to them out of love to keep them safe and close to Him. God pointed to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. He said to them, "You must not eat the fruit from this one tree." He explained that if they ate from it, it would change everything. It would open their eyes to things they weren't ready for, like sadness, fear, and knowing the difference between right and wrong in a painful way. It was a loving warning, a boundary to protect their innocent and happy lives. Following this one rule was their way of showing that they trusted God and loved Him back. It was a small test of their obedience and their hearts. Now there was a creature in the garden who was very clever and sneaky. It was the serpent. The serpent did not like God's good plan. He wanted to spoil the beautiful friendship that Adam and Eve had with God. One day, he slithered up to Eve when she was near the forbidden tree. He whispered a tricky question to her. Did God really say you can't eat from any tree in the garden? He twisted God's words to make them sound unfair and unkind, planting a tiny seed of doubt in Eve's mind about God's goodness. Eve tried to explain God's rule. She told the serpent that they could eat from the other trees, but not the one in the middle, or they would die. But the serpent was a liar. He hissed, "You won't die. God knows that when you eat it, you will be just like Him, knowing everything." He made it sound like God was hiding something wonderful from them. He made disobedience look like a secret pathway to being wise and powerful. He tempted Eve to believe that she knew better than God, and that breaking the rule was the key to something better. The serpent's words stayed in Eve's mind. She looked at the tree again. The fruit looked so delicious, so perfect and ripe. She thought about what the serpent had said. Maybe it really would make her wise. The idea of being like God was a powerful temptation. She forgot about God's loving warning and all the goodness He had already given her. The lie seemed more exciting than the truth. She made a choice. She reached out her hand, plucked the fruit from the branch, and took a bite. The sweet taste was the beginning of a great sadness. After Eve had eaten the fruit, she went and found Adam. She gave some of the fruit to him, and he chose to eat it too. In that moment, they both decided not to trust God. They listened to the serpent's lie instead of their loving Father's truth. They chose their own way instead of God's way. It was a small action, just eating a piece of fruit, but it was a big decision. It was a decision that would break the perfect harmony of the garden and change the world forever. They had turned away from the one who had given them everything. Suddenly, everything felt different. For the very first time, they looked at each other and felt shame. They realized they were naked and felt a need to hide. It was a strange and scary feeling they had never known before. They quickly gathered some fig leaves and tried to sew them together to make clothes to cover themselves. The beautiful openness they had shared was gone, replaced by fear and embarrassment. The joy and peace that had filled their hearts had vanished, and in its place, a cold and heavy feeling began to grow. Later that day, they heard the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool evening breeze. Before, this sound would have filled them with joy, and they would have run to meet him. But now, it filled them with terror. They were afraid of the one who loved them most. They ran and hid among the trees, trying to make themselves invisible. Their disobedience had built a wall of fear between them and God. The beautiful, trusting friendship they once had was broken, and the perfect garden no longer felt like a safe and happy home. The consequences of their choice were very real and very sad. When God found Adam and Eve hiding, he knew what they had done. Their decision brought sadness into the world. Life in the garden couldn't be the same anymore. God told them they would have to leave their perfect home. From then on, life would be hard. They would have to work hard for their food, and they would experience pain and sorrow. The worst part was that their close, walking and talking friendship with God was broken. The world was no longer a place of perfect peace. Leaving the Garden of Eden must have been the saddest day. They had to say goodbye to the sparkling rivers, the friendly animals, and the beautiful trees that had been their home. They were now in a world where things could go wrong, where people could get hurt, and where everyone would one day die. This is what the serpent's lie had led to. It wasn't wisdom and power, but loss and hardship. Their one act of disobedience had a ripple effect, bringing a shadow over the whole of creation and making life much more difficult for them and for everyone who would come after them. But even in this sad ending, there was a tiny glimmer of hope. God still loved Adam and Eve, even though they had disobeyed him. Before he sent them out, he showed his care by making them clothes from animal skins, which were much better than the leafy ones they had made. And he made a promise. He promised that one day, someone would come who would defeat the serpent and undo all the sadness and brokenness that had entered the world. This was the first whisper of a rescue plan, a promise of hope for the future. The story of Adam and Eve teaches us a very important lesson about our own lives. It shows us that our choices matter a great deal. God gives us guidance not to be mean or to spoil our fun, but because he loves us and knows what is best for us. Listening to his wise and loving words leads to peace and joy, while choosing our own way can lead to sadness and trouble. The story reminds us to be careful about temptations that look good on the outside but can lead us away from the best path. It encourages us to trust God's plan, knowing that his rules are there to protect us and keep us close to him.